But
How
like,
big are they?
where is the ground? They're trying to open that spot. Because they like up and then they burn.
And we're giving.
Shall we get rolling? It's 8 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
We're here to talk about John Hattie's visible learning, and I will explain a little bit about what that is in a minute. And I'm Sarah Bishop, the MPSS co-coordinator, and
Lori Wisniewski, the instructional services consultant.
so we did this initially as a quick fire on February 14th, and we'll do it even as a quicker fire maybe today. So today, some of our objectives are to understand John Hattie's updated research on visible learning and just in general what visible learning is, which is some high impact strategies with actionable steps and that help enhance student learning. And we'll talk about the effect size and the impactful practices that Hattie has identified, which then you could walk away with some practical research-backed strategies that you could implement in a classroom right now, and which should improve student outcomes. Again, you'll know you're successful leaving this if you know what effect size is and the changes that have happened to Hattie's model over the last few years, and if you could identify at least one high impact strategy. Those will be how you know if you learned something today. This material is based on John Hattie's work. I didn't bring his original, the book, which is the blue book there. It was revamped within this last year, and I'll pass this around. And then for those of us who like the comic book version, this is that. I like a visible copy there too, if you guys want to see that. And John Hattie is a professor at the University of Melbourne, or from the University of Melbourne. He actually lives in the United States now, I think it sounded like. Lori and I were fortunate enough to go to hear him speak for 2 days in Marquette. So this past October. There you go.
We didn't get any pictures of them.
No, we fangirled from yeah, I don't know. So.
All right, so a quick overview of what visible learning is, and then some updates to the latest research.
I do have a picture, like I took of him, but not with me, they finished. Yes, yeah.
Same, yeah. Okay, so he is an expert in education. He has over 25 years of research in his study called visible learning. He's an expert in performance indicators and evaluating education. In his visible learning research, he has looked at over 1,800 meta-analyses. He has, in those meta-analyses, over 108,000 studies, and the data from all of that looks at over 300 million students worldwide.
I love his work because I can remember when we were starting school improvement things back in like 2000, and Cass Himela, my high school principals, would say, you need to have research-backed interventions and research-backed practices, and I was like, how do I know it's research-backed? How do I know where to, like, I didn't know where to find anything, what to do. It was very overwhelming as an educator. So this helps guide that. Yeah.
And the new book, the graphic novel version, is really nice to look at. Okay, so what is visible learning? It looks at a bunch of educational studies, it synthesizes it, and looks at the influence on student learning, and it breaks it down by effect size. Visible learning believes that teachers should be evaluators of their own teaching, and visible learning is happening when teachers are looking at what they're doing through the eyes of the student, and students gain agency and become drivers of their own learning. Okay, so like I said before, his research looks at identifying and quantifying impact of different instructional strategies, and their focus is looking at the greatest student impact. Originally, his focus was in 6 different areas. You can see those on the screen, but later he added classroom to that list. So you can look at, when we look at the research later, you can break it down by student factors, home factors, how those impact learning, school, curriculum, the teacher, all that different things that the teacher is doing in their classroom and how that impacts student learning. Originally his list was 138 influences, but as he has continued his research, that list has grown, and in his database there's now over 350 influences.
Even while we were there, it was more than what he'd already published.
And
But
even
yeah,
in
yeah.
that graphic novel book, which is the newest printed version, if you look at the effect size and you compare it to the database, things are just constantly changing. But that being said, the core message remains the same over time. So his idea that teachers should look at their learning or their teaching in the eyes of a student, the student should track their own learning, all those things have stayed the same. Okay. So the list of influences have changed as the research is added to. Those effect sizes have changed. So if you look at that book and you go online, they're different, and that's why, because they're continually adding research, so the effect size changes. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, and then new influences are being added. Okay, so effect size. This is how Dr. Hattie looks at each influence, and you're going to have a substantial impact on student learning. So looking at these effect size, teachers can prioritize practices that have the greatest impact and enhance student achievement the most. Okay, so Dr. Hattie talks a lot about something called the hinge point in his research, and that is the average impact of all of the interventions, and the hinge point in his research is an effect size of 0.4. So 0.4 and above, they're going to have a greater than average impact on student learning, and you might accelerate student learning. Below that, you're going to have a limited impact on student learning, and then like I said, there are some influences that have a negative impact on student learning. Okay. And just to kind of wrap that all up, looking at the effect size, pick the influences that have the best and strongest potential for student learning, and you look at the question, what works best in education? So it's not necessarily always about what works, because we all have precious time, we have limited time, you want to do what works best. Okay, in Hattie's old research, he looked at the effect sizes in the form of a barometer. So you can see 0.4 is in the middle of that graphic, and then past that are greater than normal impact, and then down below it goes down. So if you look at some of those red reverse effects on student learning, suspension, boredom, retention, and then you go back up to classroom management, which is around the hinge point, classroom discussions, and then all the way at the top is collective teacher efficacy, which Sierra and I have talked about in other places. In his new research, he's switched that barometer to a thermometer. So in the graphic novel version, you can see the thermometer. Red is good in this case. Blue is bad, or not bad, but negative. So anything in the red zone is hot and is above average, and is worth noting.
Now, for me, it took like the first hour he spoke to understand what? Everything changed. All of it, the colors are different. Wait, now we have this. So I couldn't even hear what he was saying because I had to digest this.
And red is usually, oh, you're in the red.
Yeah,
Bad. No, it's red is good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you get from his research is not everything works. Some things are more effective than others, and not all activities that we choose to do in school are going to significantly impact student learning. And so that goes down to the message of know the impact, which we'll revisit later, and it helps educators prioritize the strategies that are going to have the highest impact. Again, it's not necessarily what works, but what works best. No shiny new toys. Hattie's research is not the silver bullet that if you take this, all your answers or all your questions are answered. And Hattie himself, he's got critics, of course, and so he himself says he challenges that focus of looking just at effect size. That's going to be flawed thinking. What he says to emphasize on instead is self-reflecting and looking at that evidence-based practice. connect his work to students becoming independent and having those future-ready skills. So an example here would be note-taking. If you looked at just the effect size of note-taking, that's 0.33. That's not quite to the hinge point of 0.4. It's almost there. It's not horrible. It's not great. But if you dug deeper into the research, there are different types of note-taking that are less and more effective.
Guided notes and, what's and I'm blanking out, what is it? Cornell. Cornell's the highest, actually.
Yeah, so Cornell notes and then versus copying straight from the board. Copying straight from the board is not going to be very impactful, but if you take a strategy like guided notes or Cornell notes, that impact goes up. So just looking at note-taking and saying 0.33, I'm not going to focus on that strategy is flat thinking. You've got to kind of dig deeper into the note-taking itself.
So the 4 big ideas that impact visible learning, I'll go through a few and then Lori will do the others too. Climate first, learning second, achievement third. Students should drive their own learning. Know thy impact, as she said earlier, and collective responsibility for learning. So the climate part. So we should start with, as educators and as parents and even the students should start with high expectations. That is, setting that bar high will help guide people or students to achieve higher. Our climate should be along with those high expectations, should facilitate belonging, foster classroom cohesion and friendship. He said you want a classroom that students feel comfortable taking risks and expressing themselves. Like, oh, I'm gonna try this new skill in front of my peers. And the climate should also include a strong student and teacher relationship, and we've been preaching that for quite a while up here, that has a big impact as well. Students driving their own learning, so that's talking about students engaged in their own learning. That's what that means. They should be doing work, paying attention, responding to questions. Doing that helps them stay engaged. They're taking in the information and able to kind of help process it themselves. Asking questions, collaborating with peers, thinking along with the teacher. And then the driving part would be setting their own goals, so having their own high expectations, seeking feedback, self-assessment, teaching others, and inspiring to, I want to dig deeper into this and learn more.
So it's creating that investment, like students are invested in their own learning. Okay, so back to the know thy impact. Teachers, what does that mean? Learn to think critically and ask probing questions. Questioning skills is important as a teacher. Demonstrate your impact. So be skilled at assessing and evaluating your assessments, making sure that you're looking at your own effectiveness based on the evidence that you have from your assessments. And then improve the system. So system leaders focus on identifying those successful practices, scaling them up, and then reducing unnecessary workload. We talk about all these strategies that we have going on, and we're spinning all these plates and we can't do anything well. Let's focus on the ones that are really impactful and maybe de-implement the ones that are less impactful. Okay, so teachers, remember at the beginning of the slide it said, see your learning through the eyes of the student. Stop and listen. Our job isn't just to like regurgitate and implement curriculum and deliver lessons and say, okay, we're done. It's also to ensure that we have had the impact that we are aiming for on our students and their learning. And then how do you know that we have that impact? Look at what's going well, what you need to try differently, and then refocus to make sure that we're having a maximum impact on learning and achievement, and we know that. Okay, graphics, because I put a lot of text on those last slides. Know thy impact. Look at the jar of thermometers. Some things with higher effect size, collaborative learning, simulations, classroom discussions at 0.82. The jigsaw, again, it's 1.2 here, but if you go to the meta-X, it's going to be different. Read alouds, 0.65. And then going down to the thermometer with the blue, which is bad or negative, less impactful. You have bullying at negative 0.28, boredom at negative 0.46.
Retention.
Grade level retention, negative 0.24, so, special ed teachers can advocate, it is in Hattie's research that does have a negative impact on students. Actually, I wanna do one more, labeling students, negative 0.61. So Sierra, in one of her slides, had talked about high expectations, low expectations, so labeling students, but just kind of giving them like a, they can't, or they can do this ahead of time, does have a really large negative impact on students.
All right, collective responsibility. Teachers, student leaders, and students should create and maintain collective efficacy, meaning that you believe you can achieve a desired outcome based on your actions. So you set a goal, you think, I can meet this goal, we can do this. So collectively is that it's shared collectively that, oh, I think our class can do this, make this effort happen, reach this goal. That has a high impact. This is the highest one he identified now. And this is where what I see where I meet with MTSS groups. I see them coming together, teachers, leaders, including the students sometimes, like this is where we can make a difference in our school. And there's a little bit more, one that kind of goes along with that is teacher clarity, so that things that are very clear help the students learn. So what am I learning? Why? And how will I know I'm successful? So if you notice, I started out with that at the beginning. This is what I intend to talk about, what we intend to talk about, what impact or purpose it has, and how you will know if it is successful. So that has, again, a 0.85 impact if the kids know where we're going today, that kind of thing, and how they know if they learn stuff. So it's being also transparent with what you're doing, but organizing your instruction, explaining content, giving examples of guided practice, using informed decisions based on assessments, and again, students understanding what will make them successful there. So if you remember today when we started, we said you'll be able to articulate what effect size is. So if you thumbs up or down if you think you know what effect size is now. All right, and if you in your mind can think of at least one high impact strategy we mentioned today, thumbs up or down. Okay, so that's where we hit. Do you want to
Click on it?
Or yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so there is a website on this research. It's visiblelearningmetax.com, and the screenshot here is just a picture of the home screen that you get to. So you can pick different categories of learning strategies to go and see what their effect size is. So we'll click on that. And let's go to the teacher. And you can organize it by alphabetical order, either way. So collective teacher efficacy, you can click on that. But before you click on it, it tells you how many meta-analyses were done in that strategy or that influence, and so there were 4. And that had 132 studies. Where did it go? What did I do?
No, I don't know.
Start over. Okay.
Did you click in? Oh,
Maybe I did, yeah, I'll have to do it on here. I thought I could just scroll over again. Okay. So 132 studies, it involved 29,000 students. And
down.
It went down, the effect size is 1.01. But if you look at it, click down and you drill down into this research, it looks at the different meta-analyses that were done. And so the latest one was from 2022. And if you look at the title, it says Influence of School Leadership on Collective Teacher Efficacy Across Cultural Meta-Analysis. And then you look at the effect size of that is 0.41. So that really tanked the effect size of this influence, but I guess like in my mind, this is talking about leadership, the effect of leadership on collective efficacy, and the other ones are kind of in groups of teachers. So you take that, you know, as you will, and like Hattie said, don't just look at the effect size, dig down into the research and see what you take from that.
All right, any questions or any?
So I guess I have a question. So I see the value in like having a way to put all the data together about like all these studies. That's pretty genius. But you said he has some detractors. What are the detractions against what he's done here?
I would say because it's not necessarily his own original work, he's not doing the studies, he's organizing the studies.
Okay.
That would be one of them. And then the question is, will this work continue after he's gone? He is in his 70s-ish, I think. Yeah.
And like the case of note taking, you know, people will take that and say, well, that strategy is more effective than what you say it is.
Yeah.
And so there's arguments on you know, what his research says, looking at those collective studies.
Any other questions?
You just give me the elevator speech on what Cornell notes are.
That would be like a note outline that you're heading and your subheading. What Google Docs does for us now on the left is kind of the start of Cornell notes, and then
Like old fashioned.
you know, subtitles, subtext, you know, A, B, C.
Make an outline of the paper
Yeah,
or the
they
book.
could- yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
give the kids an outline and they fill it in.
Yes,
Gotcha.
because it's making them like go through, understand what's happening, and then put it
And
back up.
organize the
Yep.
information, got it.
I have another question. How are we getting like this information out to teachers?
The most that I have done, well, February 14th, and then data review times.
Can we talk about it at your classroom management?
Yes, and
And
the
teacher.
Yeah.
And decoding
And-
and coding, I use pieces of it.
So we do put it in
Embedded.
And when we do different trainings, if I do school improvement trainings, and I do some kind of engagement activity, it'll be an instructional strategy that is high impact, and then I'll share, like.
And we've been doing that in some of our trainings as well, as we are trying to model what we're doing and why, and then showing that effect size. Now, the information behind what it really means isn't always, because it takes, 20-30 minutes to get
Split
that
job,
piece out,
yeah.
right? But I see that even as a need, what we had done in the classroom management piece, like when we did with CTE, we didn't really go into what that site could give them
No.
and what it all meant. It was too quick of a. It would help with deselecting practices that you do sometimes. It's helpful with a teacher if, like, if we're gonna talk about like something and then, let's look it up and see what our effect size, and sometimes it's very eye-opening. There, like music on in the classroom. It doesn't really give you much bang for your buck. Other
But
than
does
maybe
that
you
mean that
like
you,
it.
does it,
Right,
does that
yeah.
mean that you stop doing it? No,
No,
I mean,
right.
but it,
It's-
you just,
It's not giving you as much as, it didn't give me as much as I thought it gave me.
Yeah.
An effect size, so.
it's
Yeah.
reflecting on your practice as a teacher, I think is one of the most important things to take away is, do we do that often enough that we're reflecting on how actually impactful we are? We're under pressure to cover so much stuff that we're sometimes forgetful of, well, am I actually getting across what I intended to get across?
I would say amen to that, right? Like, change is so hard for people. When you start, you go back to your note-taking example, like, well, I just talk and they take notes, like, cause that's what I'm comfortable with. Like, how do we get teachers and even students out of that comfort zone?
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, there could be a better way, or you could have higher results.
Right.
So,
And sometimes that is hard for students, especially when they've been doing it, the kind of passive learning. When you ask them to do something that's a little bit more engaging and thought-provoking, it's hard. So they like to buck at that because it's hard.
How is the data like weighted by time. Like I'm just thinking of like lagging studies. So like a study from 10 to 15 years ago would be probably wildly different than a classroom that's now. And so even if it's a large study versus a small study, I'm just thinking about dynamics.
I don't know if it's weighted.
He has not, I've not heard him say that.
All right.
He did to the old stuff, yeah. And I did read the longer book of like, not every word in it, but like, at least like the gist of like the background and things, and I don't remember him saying that.
This robustness index.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
Yeah. He is fascinating.
Just because it's old doesn't mean that's
No,
true.
but like,
Yeah.
but-
Sometimes it takes a long time for that research to actually get into the
yeah,
classroom.
Like
but
classroom
but I think of like
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
even from like 10 years ago, the use of visual instruments and all those kinds of things have changed wildly. There's so much impact. So if you look at
Right.
if a study is weighted the same as it was 10 to 15 years ago, there's a lot more. Just the change is very different.
Yeah. I guess that's why I think it's nice that you can drill down
That's
into
cool.
those studies and kind of just, like you said, I have my own thoughts about what I think is credible or not, and reflect on your own teaching.
Anything else? Well, thank you, and have a good Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
I think I have that.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to go back.
We went back slides around and share during professional development.